Kabul's Chinatown is unlike any other Chinatown in the world. It's hard to find Chinese faces here, but there are plenty of Chinese-made products.
They are Chinese brands. We bring quality products to the market.
Opened in 2019, Kabul's Chinatown is more of a marketplace. It's where Afghans sell and buy Chinese products. While Afghanistan gets imports from Pakistan, Iran, and China, Chinese products offering low prices draw people here.
Chinese goods have a good market in Afghanistan, and it is developing.
This Chinatown has already been moved once, and there are plans to move it again, says this Chinatown shopkeeper Hafizullah.
In the future, they will have a very nice place in Dessabs. Chinese want to build a town, and they plan to have 150 factories there.
Hafizullah is referring to the Chinatown Industrial Park project, about 19 kilometers northeast of the current Chinatown. Announced in 2022, developments on the new industrial park can be seen here from the Chinatown in Afghanistan website, sponsored by China's Ministry of Commerce. Chinese state media Global Times then cited Chinatown Kabul's Deputy General Manager Li Zhijing and reported the project to include partnerships from mining to urban area construction and production of building materials. So far, construction and development have been minimal based on images analyzed by researchers at the Global Disinformation Lab at the University of Texas in Austin. Chinese companies have shown interest in Afghanistan's mining sector, but experts say further business partnerships are being hindered by Beijing's concerns over terrorist activities that would affect Chinese business inside Afghanistan and even potentially spill over into China.
I think the economic-oriented relationship between China and Afghanistan is important, but it is not possible currently, and the relationship between China and Afghanistan is believed to be more security-oriented.
To that end, Beijing has repeatedly expressed concern and encouraged the Taliban to combat all forms of terrorist forces within the country. For VOA's Afghan service, Bejan Hamdard, VOA News.
From duck to dim sum, the kitchen inside Shondae restaurant in Johannesburg gives Chinese immigrants a little taste of home. Hong Kong native and restaurant owner Kun Chan immigrated to South Africa almost 40 years ago.
It was easy to make money in South Africa back then.
Chan used to have a restaurant in the old original Chinatown. He closed that business because people got scared going to the old Chinatown due to crime. Chinese migrants have been living in Johannesburg before the old Chinatown was even built. The first Chinese arrived in the From duck to dim sum, the kitchen inside Shondae restaurant in Johannesburg gives Chinese immigrants a little taste of home. Hong Kong native and restaurant owner Kun Chan immigrated to South Africa almost 40 years ago.
It was easy to make money in South Africa back then.
Chan used to have a restaurant in the old original Chinatown. He closed that business because people got scared going to the old Chinatown due to crime. Chinese migrants have been living in Johannesburg before the old Chinatown was even built. The first Chinese arrived in the 17th century as convicts or slaves from what is now Indonesia with the Dutch East India Company. Then, during the early 1800s, Chinese indentured laborers were brought to work on the railways. The original Chinatown on Commissioner Street was established in the 1880s when free Chinese from the impoverished south of China came to the frontier mining town as part of the gold rush. Then, in 1948, South Africa established the apartheid system. Chinese living in the country were classified as colored. Like black South Africans at the time, they were restricted to living in certain areas, but much has changed. Apartheid ended and a democratic government was formed in 1994. How ethnic Chinese immigrants from different backgrounds see each other also changed, says Arthur Ma.
Before, say 20 years ago, you could feel it because we don't even really speak to each other, the new and the old one. We just stick to our own selves, the local Chinese and the overseas Chinese. Now, We help one another.
Ma is a first-generation Chinese South African. His father fled poverty in southern China and arrived by boat in 1942. As life improved here, he sent money back home.
Then we actually help build a hospital, give a little bit donation in our own village.
Now, Johannesburg's ethnic Chinese community includes people from Taiwan and Hong Kong. And as China opens up and prospers, there are new immigrants from mainland China.
Anything we need help, we always ask the new ones because they're the ones with the money, you see, because China's going good. But we pave the road for them in this country.
Now there is a new, safer Chinatown where more Chinese gather in the suburb of Cyrildene. South African-born doctor Alice Yulin Phan's parents moved from Taiwan in the 1980s.
My dad and my aunt opened up factories in Bloemfontein, and then afterwards they opened up restaurants. So quite.
Yulin Phan and Chan's children and grandchildren can now live where they choose to live in the city. Many have professional jobs, but still come to the new Chinatown where Chan has relocated his restaurant. Eating, celebrating festivals, events that bring ethnic Chinese from different backgrounds together to keep traditions alive. Kate Bartlett, VOA News, Johannesburg.
From caramel sunflower seeds to Chinese instant noodles, the Fengcheng supermarket has a wide variety of products.
This supermarket is not only for Chinese, for any people.
This market is in one of the mini Chinatowns in Nairobi. Located in the Kilimani neighborhood, it's about 5 kilometers west of the city's central business district. Owner and former doctor Liu Fengchen opened this market 6 years ago. Originally from China, he came to Kenya 3 decades ago. He married a Kenyan and they have 2 children. Chan says he became an entrepreneur because he saw a business opportunity here.
I check from 30 years ago up to now, is the Chinese that comes some more than before.
The modern-day wave of migration from China to Kenya took off during the administration of late President Mwai Kibaki, says Nairobi University's Kenneth Ambongi.
Kibaki sort of formulated a foreign policy that was anchored around what we call positive engagement in diplomacy, which was, if we have danced to the tune of the West all this long, and we have not been able to move as fast as we wanted to move development-wise, why can't we try the East?
Like many African countries, Kenya has green-lighted massive Chinese-built infrastructure, including highways and railroads. They are part of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-billion-dollar vision aimed to promote trade and investment by connecting China to the world through infrastructure projects. Along with more Chinese workers connected to these projects are businesses that cater to them.
We provide soup, a pot of soup, beef soup to be precise. You cook by yourself, so we have a variety of things. There's different kinds of meats.
General Manager Stephen Obado says he's been working at the Hot Pot Train restaurant in Chinatown since it opened in January.
Majority of our customers are Asians, but we also have local customers. So Chinese people and Thailand people, those are the majority of the people we get here.
Bonnie Howe, originally from Shanghai, recently moved to Kenya from Uganda for work 6 months ago. She's been a regular visitor here.
By eating the hot pot, it can make me missing my homeland. Maybe I'm going to for shopping. Some Chinese will use some special things, like the vegetable is different from local.
Fresh faces mean more business for Liu Fengchen. Between the Chinese and local customers, plus the years he's been living here, he's learned to embrace Kenyan culture and even picked up a little Swahili.
Mariama
Jallo, VOA News, Nairobi.
In the middle of Glodok, Indonesia's largest Chinatown, the smell of coffee has been drawing diners in for almost 100 years. Chinese-Indonesian Leong Mingjo is the third generation in his family to run this coffee shop, Kopi Estaki.
In the past, many people gathered here to drink coffee. Traders and workers gathered here, drank coffee, and talked for hours. From my grandfather's time, it was like that.
Chinese people have been migrating to Southeast Asia and Indonesia for centuries. Most of them came from China's coastal provinces of Fujian and Guangdong to trade or work on farms.
Why did they go to Indonesia? From some historical records, the Southeast Asian region has long been known to the Chinese people as a fertile region.
In the 1600s, the Dutch East India Company started colonizing parts of Indonesia, a region known as the East Indies. After deadly unrest broke out between the Dutch and Chinese laborers in 1740, the Dutch imposed severe restriction on the Chinese. That's how the Chinatown area called Glodok was formed.
At the time, Chinese people were not allowed to live outside the Chinese district. They could only live in that district. So they worked there, traded there, lived, and carried out all their activities in that district.
Nearly 300 years later, things have changed. Glodok is now one of the key commercial districts in Jakarta. The descendants of the early Chinese migrants have become some of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. Here on Pancoran Street, Chinese Indonesians own shops that sell everything from traditional herbs for the heart to chicken rice. Their commute to work takes only minutes.
People of Chinese descent are mostly traders, and because of their trading activities, they created a residential concept that is effective to conduct business, the shop house concept. They live on the upper floor, and the shop is on the ground floor.
But modernization is changing the face of this Chinatown. Shopping malls and chains like Starbucks are built in the middle of Glodok. Leong says they threaten traditional establishments, like his coffee shop. But he is determined to push ahead with his nearly century-old business.
We are different from Starbucks or any other modern coffee shops. So as long as people still like it, we will continue.
The city government has designated Glodok Chinatown as a cultural heritage area. A new gate went up in 2022. It's a symbol of Jakarta's diversity, honoring what Chinese Indonesians have built to make the city what it is today. Ahadian Utama, VOA News, Jakarta, Indonesia.
These murals can be found across Singapore, created by Yip Yu Chong. Some of his most famous pieces can be found in the city's Chinatown.
The interior of my Chinatown home.
Yip grew up in Chinatown. His family shared a small house with up to 5 other families at a time. But it was what happened outside that shaped his childhood.
The whole street is called the Street of the Dead because on the street there were funeral parlors, coffin makers.
Like so much of Singapore's history, the story of Chinatown begins with Britain's Sir Stamford Raffles. In 1822, he designated a settlement for the many new Chinese immigrant arrivals.
The British had established themselves in Singapore. They had created law and order. There was tremendous hardship in China and difficulties. And so it was natural at that point of a period where there was great disorder and instability in China to go forth.
This small island, once a British colony, is now its own nation and has become the second largest port in the world. Despite the name, Chinatown is not a Chinese-only community. The district reflects Singapore's patchwork of cultures. Chinatown is home to the oldest Hindu temple in the country, and one of Singapore's earliest mosques is just up the road. Chinatown is also famous for its elegant shop houses, but as the Chinese population continued to grow, they became overcrowded. It led to many residents being rehoused across Singapore. But for a country where ethnic Chinese make up 3/4 of the population, this part of the city is still a focal point.
And the idea of it remains powerful enough for the community to gather here during special Chinese occasions.
Today, Chinatown is a hub for Singapore's many visitors, filled with sound, colour, food and shops. It's also home to many family-run businesses, like Tong Heng, which has been serving pastries since the 1930s. Its famous diamond-shaped egg tarts are as popular as ever and one of the oldest brands in Chinatown. Today, Anna Fong runs the pastry shop, established by her great-grandfather.
There's a very strong bond, like all businesses, helping each other, and there's this very strong community spirit.
Whilst that spirit might remain, plenty of other things have changed. In 1983, Yip and his family relocated from their small house to a new high-rise public housing by the country's Housing Development Board, or HDB.
My family was very lucky to have moved to the 25th floor of the HDB flat. Wow, it was huge luxury.
Huge skyscrapers now dominate the city-state skyline, but these distinctive Chinatown buildings have been preserved, with this historic district still at the heart of a very modern metropolis. Adam Hancock, VOA News, Singapore.
Restaurateur Jeffrey Leong is a dumpling fanatic, and his even have royal approval. Leong served dim sum and Chinese tea to then Prince Charles and his wife Camilla at his Chinatown restaurant in 2015. This Hong Kong native arrived in London in 1987.
I myself came over, I couldn't speak a word of English.
Leong was 10 years old.
My parents chose for us to come to London because, again, the really good relationship between Britain and Hong Kong and China throughout these years have enabled the understanding of the language, the culture. Imagine the first restaurant that opened here, when the first family that opened and all the Chinese goes, wow, that restaurant is busy, let's open another one. Competition has to be healthy.
Chinatown lies at the very heart of the British capital. Chinese communities have long been in London, drawn to the city because of its port, says local guide Freya Aitken-Turf.
In the late 1800s, we see a large-scale migration into an area of London called Limehouse. It's east of here, and it's where London's docklands are. These gentlemen were recruited as sailors to staff the shipping fleets.
Chinese communities began to move into Soho in central London in the mid-20th century, alongside other migrant communities.
Rents here in the 1960s were relatively low, leases were short, and that gave people the chance or the opportunity to take the risk to come and settle here.
The Chinese community is diverse, with links to Britain's colonial history.
Many of those people arriving into this area and starting businesses during the 1960s follow some of those Chinese, but also Chinese Commonwealth roots, Malaysian Chinese, Singaporean Chinese, Caribbean Chinese, Guyanan Chinese. And so that version of Chineseness needs to have all of this complexity reflected within it. During the 60s and 70s, we see a larger wave of migration from culturally Cantonese-speaking groups of people from Hong Kong and the New Territories.
Recent decades have seen immigrants arriving from different parts of China, setting up business here.
There's now a lot more regional Chinese food. We have dishes from Xinjiang, lamb with cumins. We've got dishes from Dongbei, which is the old Rust Belt of China.
London's Chinatown has remained not as a place of residence, but as a bustling destination for Chinese and other Asian communities, although some see it as a cliched representation of their culture, says Aitken-Turf.
This is a place of business, this is a place where people come to socialise. For some people of East and Southeast Asian heritage, that idea that their cultural heritage is so closely connected to this area can be offensive, painful, not positive. For others, this is a place of great pride.
While diners can still find traditional Chinese tea here, many bubble tea shops have popped up in recent years to satisfy younger palates as London's Chinatown evolves with local and global trends, a place of history that never stands still. Henry Ridgwell, VOA News, Chinatown in London.
From the colors to the sounds. And, above all, the flavors, the ingredients that make up Lima's Chinatown. It is a fusion of cultures that can be experienced in the food scene here, says restaurant owner Vanessa Young.
One of the most common tales you hear is that when the Chinese arrive, they would say "chi-fan." Chi means eat and fan rice. When Peruvians walked by Chinatown, they would say, "Hey, what are the Chinese doing? Chi-fan, chi-fan. Oh look, their food is called chi-fan," and it stuck.
John has taken the fusion of both cultures to her kitchen.
What did the Chinese teach the Peruvians? The way to stir fry, the use of the wok. But what did we teach the Chinese? We add yellow pepper, Peruvian pisco to our dishes. That fusion creates a super enriching intercultural gastronomy.
Chinatown is a place Daniel Shang has been visiting since he was a teenager.
Chinatown is part of our history, where our grandparents brought us to unite the whole family.
Chinese migrants first arrived in Peru in 1849 under the so-called Chinese law. As indentured laborers and servants, the Chinese filled the shortage created by the abolition of slavery 5 years after the first Chinese arrived here. Most of them came from the Guangdong province in southern China.
The Great Wave was between 1849 and 1874, when 100,000 Chinese arrived.
After working on the land owned by wealthy Peruvians and fulfilling 5 to 8 year contracts, the Chinese were free to start a new life. Many Chinese moved to Lima.
The first thing the Chinese did here was start businesses. That's all they knew how to do here in Lima.
Other waves of migration brought more Chinese to the country. Very few Chinese families still live in Chinatown, but the community maintains its cultural link to the past in the markets.
These are the Chinese mushrooms used in all Chinese stir-fries.
On these streets, rituals connect Shang to his ancestors.
This is the entrance of the Guangkun Temple. Guangkun is the Chinese warrior who has been venerated by the Chinese community over time.
There are currently about 3 million people of Chinese descent living in Peru. That's almost 9% of the country's population, and with China being Peru's largest trading partner and a place where China is building a major Latin American port, Chinese people are still coming for business. For the descendants of some of the earliest migrants to Peru, the Chinese language may be lost over time, but Chinese traditions, faith, and food can still be found in Chinatown. Adriana Núñez Rabascal for VOA News, Lima, Peru.
Detroit may be known for its car industry, but there is something else famous among locals that can be found in the city and suburbs of Detroit: the signature dish, almond boneless chicken.
Here you have it, the almond chicken with the scallion waffle. Detroiters really know almond chicken is something that's true and dear to a lot of Detroiters.
While its exact origins in the New World are unknown, local lore claims the dish is the product of Chinese immigrants from the early 1900s. It's hugely popular in Detroit and the surrounding suburbs, a region with some 70,000 Chinese Americans. There used to be a centralized Chinatown here.
So we start by welcoming you to Chinatown.
Now Detroit's Chinatowns are only remembered in this museum exhibit. The first Chinese immigrants arrived in 1872 and established laundry businesses, which attracted more migrants from China. Some opened restaurants, most of them were from Guangdong province in southern China.
People come from this area called Taishan in Guangdong, China, and make it over to the US in order to escape the level of poverty that they were dealing with at the time.
Many Cantonese-speaking immigrants faced new obstacles in their new home. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act banned Chinese laborers from entering the US with only a few exceptions. Those already living in the US had to get permission to re-enter if they left the country. Chinese immigrants could only live in certain neighborhoods, but they kept coming.
This is my father. He came and this is 1939.
4 years later, the US repealed the Chinese Exclusion Act. Wing Lim Wong and his sister grew up in Detroit's second Chinatown, after the first one was forced to move for a new freeway in the 1960s. Their father worked in a restaurant which he later bought.
At the age like maybe 11 years old, you start learning maybe help out with waiting the tables.
The second Chinatown was in a rough part of Detroit, remembers Curtis Chin. He wrote about his family's restaurant.
The red light district, yeah, it was terrible. I mean, it was tough. We were exposed to a lot of things growing up as a kid. You would see the prostitutes on the road all the time and coming into our restaurant too.
Most of the businesses in Chinatown closed due to rising crime, including Wong's. The area eventually revitalized with new businesses, but this no longer feels like Chinatown.
It's not a Chinese community anymore down there. And
that's the sad part.
That's the sad part.
Similar to many U.S. cities, the nexus of the Chinese community in Detroit assimilated into the suburbs and strip malls. But the memories of the Chinatowns live on out here and inside Chinese restaurants where almond chicken is still served. Chris Casquejo, VOA News, Detroit.
These furry friends come to mind when New Yorkers describe the type of people drawn to Long Island City.
They love to keep doggies.
So there's an abundance of just dogs and dog parks.
Another notable attribute of this neighborhood, the growing number of Asian faces and Chinese characters here.
The buzz is there, where this is almost like the new Chinatown.
In a city where Asians make up more than 14% of the population, there are actually several so-called Chinatowns in New York City. There's the old Chinatown in downtown Manhattan, with roots in the mid-1800s. And the Queens neighborhood of Flushing is home to the largest number of Chinese immigrants in New York City, some 70,000. Software engineer turned martial arts coach Kit Young was living in Flushing until he discovered Long Island City.
Several years ago, I had a puppy, and I came to Long Island City to a dog park, and I just instantly fell in love with Long Island City.
Not only did Young move here, he's also seen a growing number of Asians attending classes at his gym.
Here in Long Island City, it's a more modern, you get a lot of young professionals, a lot of students, a more hip, cooler type of Asian food and trendy restaurants and trendy bubble tea and desserts.
Running one bubble tea spot is Zoe Jung. She saw a business opportunity in Long Island City.
A lot of my friends that live in Long Island City because Long Island City is very close to Manhattan.
Originally from China, Jung moved to New York with her parents. She lives with them in Flushing but hopes to move here one day.
The Long Island City has a lot of new skyscrapers than in Flushing or in old Chinatown, Manhattan.
These shiny new buildings have not always been here, says Long Island City entrepreneur Chris Yu, whose parents are from Taiwan.
I remember when I first moved to New York 7-8 years ago, it was actually still quite industrial. All the apartments are pretty low rises. You know, now when you're in LAC, you see all the high rises.
The most prominent high-rise is this 67-story condominium, Skyline Tower. It's an example of how new construction in Long Island City offers a little more for the money than the older buildings in Manhattan.
You know, you have a 24-hour door person, you've got a gym, you've got a roof deck, you've got a pool. The views are incredible. I mean, you know, Skyline Tower, you would hope you would have some skyline views, and you certainly do.
The area around Skyline Tower is also the center of where the Chinese community lives and shops.
So I feel like this is the cooler type of Chinatown.
Only a few subway stops from Manhattan, where many people work and attend school, they can come home to a different scenery.
You know, when you get off the subway here, you can exhale a little bit. There's a little bit more space, a little bit more room to breathe.
And more space for Young, his dogs, and other four-legged friends to play with their owners by the river in Long Island City. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News, New York.
Traditions. and festivals in San Francisco's Chinatown date back almost 200 years, when Chinese immigrants arrived and settled in this city on the U.S. California coast. Shan Su, originally from China, brought his children here to connect with their roots.
We want them to know where they come from, and to keep the tradition going.
In the middle of all these Chinese-owned businesses is Buddha Exquisite, the Chung family store, where another Chinese tradition is alive. Shoppers can find paper products to burn ceremonially in tribute to their ancestors.
There's a couple seasons throughout the years that we want to visit our ancestor, and this is what we send them.
Chinatown's 24 blocks include shops, restaurants, schools, a hospital, and social clubs. It's also a place tourists and dignitaries visit. But Chinese people have not always been welcomed in San Francisco. Chinese migrants faced discrimination with the discovery of gold in California's foothills in 1848. Thousands from southern China, faced with poverty and civil war at home, were either recruited or lured to what they called Gold Mountain to work in mines and railroad construction. Those who remained in California endured a long period of racism. With the completion of the railroads, many Chinese laborers found work constructing over 1,700 kilometers of levees, transforming the Sacramento River Delta into farmland. Drawing on their knowledge from home, they worked on farms and settled in towns along the Sacramento River. One of them is the town of Locke, about 120 kilometers northeast of San Francisco. Chinese settlers from the Guangdong province built Locke in 1915. Hong Kong native Clarence Chu operates 3 museums in town. When he first arrived in Locke almost 50 years ago, Chu was amazed at how traditional culture still lives on here.
To me, though, coming from Hong Kong and so westernized, I thought that I better learn something from them about the Chinese culture.
Once a haven for thousands of Chinese farm workers, Locke's population has since dwindled.
Some of the younger people started to leave because they have better opportunity, go to college, go to get jobs easier in the city.
Today, new Chinese immigrants to the San Francisco area are mostly highly skilled tech workers or students. Many of them live or work south of the city in Silicon Valley. Strip malls catering to Chinese Americans, like this one in Cupertino, can be found throughout Silicon Valley. Here for lunch, Ernie Chen works across the street at Apple headquarters.
The Chinese community, I think, is pretty spread out, so you can find similar shops in many places already.
Still, some Chinese Americans head back to the Chinatown in San Francisco to feel a stronger sense of community and celebrate their Chinese heritage. Matt Dibble, VOA News, San Francisco.
Although many Chinese Americans still celebrate major festivals, live and work in historic Chinatown in downtown Los Angeles, the most heavily populated Chinese areas of Los Angeles are the eastern suburbs, the San Gabriel Valley. 13-year-old Jenny Ha plays with her younger brother here, a place that has attracted many migrants from mainland China. Jenny, her brother and father made their way through Central America, and VOA met them at a migrant center in Panama in February. Their father, Ha, asks that he not be fully identified for fear that Chinese authorities will harass his family in China.
Our boat overturned, so we couldn't go by boat. So instead of a 2.5-day walk, we had to walk for 4.5 days in the rainforest.
He would later lose sight of the migrant caravan in the depths of the rainforest.
I couldn't see anyone in front of us or behind us. At that point, it was a test of my own state of mind.
They persevered. When the family reached the United States, they asked for political asylum, and their case is pending. Jenny misses her dog back in China and her mom, who will join them later, but she is happy here.
The America I had imagined is a place that's not very safe. But once I got here, I feel it's quite quiet here, and they're especially kind to children.
Another asylum applicant from China, Li DeLong, delivers food from a rental car. 2 years ago, he faced hardships and bandits in Central America. Li now lives and works in a neighborhood where not much English is needed to survive.
My understanding is that the U.S. is a country of immigrants. Different ethnicities all live within their communities. For a new immigrant like me, who doesn't really understand English, I mainly live in the Chinese enclave.
Li copes with loneliness, but says life is better here than in China.
In that kind of environment, it's hard to survive. We're not optimistic about the future of China, especially since Xi Jinping came to power. The Chinese economy is declining in a straight line.
U.S. officials say from October 2023 through April 2024, 27,700 Chinese migrants tried to enter without visas through the southern border, along with hundreds of thousands of migrants from other countries. The waves of Chinese immigrants arriving in Los Angeles over the years have received help from benevolent groups made up of Chinese who had come before them. More recently, help has come from outside their own communities, including English lessons from this local church and household supplies at this neighborhood charity drive. Much of the aid is informal, coming from new friends made at work or at gathering places like shopping centers and temples, as they adapt to a world that's both familiar and different. Michael Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Well, the Supreme Court is just one example of the eroding trust in America's institutions. For decades, an elite majority has weaponized language and promoted false history, according to historian Heather Cox Richardson. She explores how this has led some Americans into authoritarianism in her new book, and she joins Michelle Martin to discuss.
Thanks, Bianna. Heather Cox Richardson, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.
As you and I are speaking now, we're in this really strange kind of moment where, the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, is losing his job because he compromised with the Democrats to keep the government open and, all these other things. Looking at all the things that are going on in our politics at the moment, is there a way you could put this into context for us?
Yes, but let's start with what you just said. The idea that for the Speaker of the House, who is a Republican, to work with Democrats, who of course represent their constituents, to keep the government open is somehow something that makes him in his own conference be unpopular. Mm-hmm. That is completely antithetical to the way this government was always supposed to work. So from the beginning, we're in a really unusual moment. One of the things that I study, of course, is what's happened to the Republican Party. And one of the things I like to emphasize is this is not your mother's Republican Party. It has become an extremist faction that has within its goals to get rid of the kind of government under which we've lived since 1933. So you have to start from the premise that you can't both sides this issue. We have a national problem that is embodied by one hard right extremist party. That's not to say the Democrats are right about everything, but that's to say that this is a moment in which we have to take a step back and recognize a larger challenge to our democracy that happens to be embodied right now by a certain division, a certain partisan division, but one that echoes other moments in our history that we got through by working together to isolate the extremists.
And I'm going to ask you to kind of walk us through your argument. That is the subject of your book, Democracy Awakening. But I kind of want to skip ahead to the point that you make several times in the book. You make the point very persuasively and chillingly, I have to say, that sometimes people get to a point where they're so invested in their belief system, they don't care what's true, okay? So I'm just interested in, if you believe that that's where we are, how do you address that?
Well, yes, and that's not original to me. That's something that scholars of authoritarianism and totalitarianism have identified at least since World War II. And their question was this: why do we need to worry about the rise of dictators when the real problem is the people who follow the dictators? Because every generation has authoritarians and dictators, but only in some generations do they actually get enough traction to take over a government. And what they argued, and I think what we see nowadays really clearly, is the rise of a politics politics that erases reality in favor of a really attractive image, or an attractive image for some people. And what that image says is that we can take you people who feel disaffected either economically or religiously or culturally, socially, and we can make you feel as important as you used to. And the way that we're going to do that is by going back to a series of laws that are either divine or set down by the universe that our enemies, and who those enemies are doesn't really matter, are ignoring. And on that beautiful story, a number of people begin to rest their identities. And they don't necessarily expect their lives are going to get better. They expect they're defending this traditional vision of a country. And this is not, by the way, unique to the United States. The trick to this, though, is I think that people begin to be attracted by that false reality, and some people really do give it their identities. But most people are more than willing to embrace a different identity, an identity that actually solves problems and an identity that actually moves this country forward to expand our democracy as they have in the past. And those are the people that we want to be talking to and emphasizing right now, not that 20 or so percent of Americans who are simply lost. And you will see that in any kind of rise of a totalitarian movement. And then later on its fall. Some people simply cannot let go of that identity, but most people can recognize either that they've been duped and they become apathetic again, or that they've been duped and they need to fight back to take back a real country.
So who's your book for? And who are you writing for?
So this book is for the people who want to understand our country, want to feel a part of it, but feel like there's too much coming at them to understand all the different pieces. When did the parties switch sides? What is the Electoral College? What does the Constitution say in the 14th Amendment? All those different things that seem to be in the news, but aren't there in such an orderly way that you can understand them. So this is really a series of short essays that take you through how we got here from 1937 to 2015, what the rise of an authoritarian meant in the United States from 2015 until the present, and crucially, that final section, how do we look at the people who came before us and see how they faced a similar moment and got out of it?
Let's just start with the New Deal. That's the first section of the book. You said that FDR created what you call a liberal consensus in government that kind of